Okay, we continue part two of this video. Man,
United States is the largest exporter worldwide of LNG. Then taking it a step further, thinking about it more carefully, every barrel that does not leave the Arabian Gulf is a barrel that China doesn't receive. China, which is currently preparing for what comes next when it comes to Taiwan, for example. China, which depends on Gulf energy in ways that the United States simply does not. Around 40% of its oil travels through the Straits of Hormuz. China has this week already asked its refiners to stop signing any new contracts to export fuel and to try and cancel shipments that are already committed as tight oil supply due to the Iran war curbs refinery output in the country. From Washington's perspective, a prolonged Hormuz closure is a strategic leverage being exercised automatically without American fingerprints all over it. Even Trump's offer of naval escorts and insurance for shipping through the strait is talking to the air. There is no reality, as the Navy has made it clear. It's practically impossible for them to escort commercial ships up and down the straits. Now, coming back.
now, when I bring Africa in this, you have how is Africa connected to this? The next biggest exporter of all these unrefined products is Africa. Yes, Brazil does some, but not as much as Africa. Asia also has a significant amount. That's where you see China is putting pressure on the Philippines. That they're not going to let the U.S. move in and control the oil supply in the South China Sea. You got to pay attention to these things. But right now, Africa is pumping oil. So in order to cut off that supply from Africa, guess what's going to happen in Africa? Guess what has to happen to Africa? And Africa there's no need for missiles in Africa. Ukraine, what's left of the Ukraine army is already taken out West Africa, West Central Africa, the Sahel area. I talk to you guys, well, African leaders, they cannot fight a war against these people. There's only two countries now with the capability of even minor defense against America and Israel. And one is being decimated right now. The other one, it has the ability to defend itself. And it can cause significant damage. I mean, I wouldn't put Israel up against this country. And America, I think America would want to stay out of a war with it. Nevertheless, Africa is next because it has the oil that China can use. To develop the South China Sea, put in the oil drilling equipment and so forth, will take time. Africa has the resources now. And while African leaders were asleep, I wouldn't even call it asleep, stuff in their pockets and suitcases with every penny that they can steal from their fellow Africans. While they were so focused on their corrupt, wicked practices, they didn't notice what was happening. The lack of knowledge and wisdom is the destruction of Africa. This 2063 fallacy that I always talk about. Told you there's a possibility that would happen. The Europeans made it so. The Caucasian made it so. Give you hope. And then, while you're standing on that rug, you just pull the rug out. Your leaders thought that they were making themselves wealthy. So all the Arabs now, with all their wealth, who are complaining about how they didn't want to be involved in the war.
To the FT story and the Middle East kingdom's potential threats to take away the candy basket from the United States. To understand the scale of what is now in motion, you need to understand the financial architecture of the US Gulf relationship in concrete terms, not abstract at percentages, but in actual numbers. Saudi Arabia alone held around $370 billion in US equity exposure in 2024. The Gulf GCC countries collectively represent somewhere between $4 to $5 trillion in US-linked financial commitments. Sovereign wealth funds, defense contracts, infrastructure agreements, bilateral investment treaties, all of that is on top. The UAE, under a framework announced during Trump's first 100 days in office, pledged those $1.4 trillion in US investments over the coming decades. The Saudis also promised close to the $1 trillion mark. Now, they're not abstract numbers. They underlie the ongoing financial architecture of the entire security relationship that the Middle East countries have had with the United States for decades now. They provide energy security and price their oil in dollars, and they spend all that money in US equity and bond markets, and increasingly through foreign direct investment. They are functionally what the Pentagon is borrowing against when it parks those carriers in the Arabian Gulf. The American security umbrella over the Gulf has always been a transaction. The United States, in return, provides security guarantees and weapon systems and an implicit premise that it would actually protect them. Now, they thought they would get the same protection as Israel if they stood with the United States. And during this war, they found out they were second-rate allies. When weapons ran in short supply, they were going to be handed to Israel first to protect itself. And their officials have started complaining as much to different media sources. The way they see it is that the implicit promise has now been broken. And what the Gulf states are doing through this FT reported discussions, through the private ceasefire lobbying that multiple outlets have now confirmed, is exactly what any rational counterparty does when a principal in a relationship exposes the agent to a unilateral risk without their consent. They are, the GCC countries, are quantifying the cost of this relationship relative to the cost of revising it. Now, as a Gulf official told the Financial Times directly, a number of Gulf countries have begun an internal review to determine whether force majeure clauses can be invoked in current contracts. The 1973 oil embargo began with a similar calculation. Arab states decided that the cost of the existing relationship exceeded the cost of weaponizing their leverage. The mechanism at that point was energy. Now the mechanism is capital. The Gulf states collectively hold enough US financial exposure that even a partial, coordinated reallocation would send tremors through the American equity markets, treasury yields, and the dollar itself.
But guess what? Do you think America will allow that to happen? That's one question. That's serious. Do you think America will love that to happen? America say, look, you're going to lose every penny you got invested in the U.S. if you go through with this foolishness. And not only that, you know, all those terrorists that you got in the Middle East, we'll turn them loose on you. Do you want that? And guess what's going to happen? The Saudi king will say, he's going to start shaking because he doesn't want to give up his lifestyle. None of them. None of them want to give up their lifestyle. This is not, I mean, they can preach religion all the time. What they will swear they're the most religious on the planet. But it has nothing to do with religion when it comes to their lifestyle. They will not give up their lifestyle for that religion. So don't let it fool you. Don't let anyone fool you. This thing is going to be bad. Before I used to make these lighthearted videos that tell you, prepare, prepare, prepare. I'm not trying to scare you. Don't get scared. No. Now we're coming down to a man on 8th inning. Is finishing. 9th inning is about to begin. We're about to come into the 7,000th year. The 6,000th year is ending. In about 8 years. Oh, shoot. 7 years now. 6 years and a few. The cycle starting down. Winding down this cycle, beginning the next cycle. Well, let's go on and finish this video. It's going to be a few minutes.
Threat is credible. Now the question is whether Washington believes it's credible. And based on everything we can see and observe about how the Trump administration is currently reading this situation, the answer appears to be not yet. Analysts have already cut gross domestic product growth forecasts for the Gulf region by up to 1 percentage point. And that is assuming the conflict lasts only a few weeks. Bahrain's credit rating has been downgraded into junk due to its persistent budget deficits of over 10%. But the Gulf states aren't just facing a revenue shock. They're not just managing a temporary disruption until the war ends and the energy prices stabilize and they can once again export their oil. They also potentially face a legitimacy crisis of fundamentally different order, one that they need the money to spend, but they don't have the money to spend right now. And especially,
there's something that she's not talking about, and it affected, it caused the collapse of every superpower, if you want to call them superpowers, over the last 6,000 years. Internal conflict. And if the economies around the world sink, say Europe sinks, Europe is already sunk. If the Russian and Chinese cut off contact with America, America is going to have to force the rest of the world to take up what China and Russia are doing. And if the rest of the world don't take it up, people in America never had to live a lifestyle where they didn't have anything before. And as you can see, well, from my last video, this lady who was complaining that she don't have any money and no food, right now that's only about 10%, 15% of the population of America. When it hits 30 or 40%, it's over. You hearing what I'm telling you? I keep telling you about buying some land. Make sure you can feed yourself. I hope you've done it. I hope you have done it. Let's finish the video.
If this war continues, that's going to hit their production capacity. That's going to hit their revenue targets. Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE have all spent decades building a very specific social contract. And it's quite beautiful and elegant. The formula is very simple, but it's structurally very fragile as well. Their citizens receive subsidies, stable employment in the public sector, world-class infrastructure, and the psychological comfort of national prestige. They set up these mega projects, sport franchises, and global brand recognition. In return, these people, their citizens, stay politically compliant. They don't demand representative governance. They don't demand democracies. They do not organize and protest. They do not push back against these ruling families whose legitimacy isn't coming through democratic mandate, but coming through the delivery of material comfort. Now that model has three requirements: money, stability, and the perception of invulnerability. And the sense that the Gulf is a zone of exception. It's prosperous. It's insulated. It's above the chaos that afflicts the rest of the region. That is why the Abrahamic Accords were done. Now, all of those three requirements have now been destroyed simultaneously. The money is contracting. Energy revenues are collapsing. Shipping through the Hormuz has effectively stopped. Tourism, a sector all four states have invested enormous political capital to diversify themselves away from the oil, has fallen off a cliff. Budget pressures that were already building up well before the war have accelerated overnight, and the stability is gone. When 1,000 more drones come over Dubai or the UAE, missiles that get intercepted above Abu Dhabi, refineries that are on fire, citizens who were told the story that their governments had secured them from exactly this kind of violence are now watching it unfold in real time from their phones. And expats are leaving in droves. One post that went viral said that he moved to the UAE as a tax shelter. Instead, he's in a bomb shelter. The UAE government warned people not to post anything on social media that went against what the government was saying, otherwise they're going to prison. That invulnerability has now been shattered for the GCC. The Gulf space spent years cultivating an image of strategic neutrality and managed relationships, friendly with Washington, accommodating towards Tehran when necessary, useful to everyone in the region. But that image is now gone. They're now visibly, undeniably caught in the middle of a war they didn't choose, and their governments cannot construct a narrative that makes this look like a strength. 1 week in, and they've already lost staggering sums. Between 6 and 12 months from now, we're looking at mass contract cancellations, widespread layoffs in sectors that have absorbed enormous numbers of both expatriates and national workers. And their fiscal positions that will not be able to be sustained and will become politically unacceptable. And they'll have to make cuts to the very subsidies that kept the public sector employees happy and their populations submissive and quiet. It is a different case, and it does deserve a separate treatment. that kingdom will not face the same rapid destabilization necessarily, especially when you look at the timeline of Kuwait, Qatar, or UAE, because it's much larger. Its population is much more complex. Its geography gives it much more insulation, and its ruling family has survived crises in the past that would have destroyed other governments. But that doesn't mean Saudi Arabia is stable. It means its instability will take a different form. In 2011, Saudis were said to have spent over $30 billion to stave off the Arab revolution that was hitting the region. They gave out money like opening a water from water coming out of a tap to their population to keep them happy. But right now, the Saudis face a significant budget deficit. Where's that water coming from? Mohammed bin Salman built his entire claim to power on a single proposition, that he was the man who was going to transform Saudi Arabia into a post-oil economy. Vision 2030 is not just an economic plan. It was his justification for concentrating power in his own hands, for sidelining all those rival princes, for suppressing massively internal dissent, for imprisoning activists. All of this was justified, implicitly or explicitly, by the argument that Saudi Arabia needed a strong hand to navigate the transformation for the economy away from oil dependency. Now, that transformation was already strained before the war. NEOM, the flagship mega project, faced cost overruns, contractor disputes, and forced displacement of thousands of people from their ancestral land. The tourism targets have underperformed. The entertainment sector has grown, but not at the pace that would justify the capital that was allocated to it. Non-oil revenue as a share of GDP has improved, but remains far below the target that MBS set in 2016. The project has been massively downsized. Now, at a war that has struck Saudi infrastructure directly, Ras Tanura, one of the most critical export facilities in the world, with oil revenues collapsing at precisely the moment the vision needed them the most to fund the transition. The internal Saudi power struggle did not disappear when MBS consolidated control. It was papered over with oil money, prestige projects, and the narrative of inevitable positive transformation. That paper won't need much before it starts burning again. Beware a calm surface. You never know what lies beneath.
As I was saying, it's not about the religion anymore. All the faith that they always try to present to the world, it's not there. It is the money, the lifestyle. The faith is not even, you would look at the Hajj and you say, wow, look at, all faults. You can see it for your face. And the funny thing is, the Africans are more dedicated to this because they're poor. No money. They had the money. It won't happen. So the Africans are being squeezed by the Saudis too. Turks, everybody in Africa, building mosques to keep that fervor of religion. Africans remain lack of knowledge and wisdom with their leaders. Oh, well.
This in America needs Gulf cooperation, and that may be correct in the immediate term. It may be correct for the next 6 months, and it might even be correct through to the end of this war. But the structural damage is being done to the relationship, and it's not going to be temporary. The Gulf governments that survive this crisis will emerge from it with a fundamentally different understanding of what American security guarantees are worth. This Gulf leadership already has closer relations with China than the generation before them. The Saudis are already selling some of their oil in yuan to the Chinese. Soon they will make different decisions about where to park their sovereign wealth, which currencies to hold their reserves in, which security partnerships to invest in, and how much base access to extend to a partner that treats its allies as terrain rather than counterparties. That is the long-run cost of the assumptions that allies are clients. Not an immediate rupture necessarily, but it will be a gradual structural decoupling that will change the architecture of American power projection in the region over the next decade. Now, the 1973 embargo didn't destroy the US Gulf relationship, but at the time, it also permanently changed it. This moment has that same quality. Whatever the immediate outcome, the relationship that's going to come out on the other side will not be the relationship that went in. Al-Habdour's letter. True leadership is not measured by war decisions, but by wisdom, respect for others, and pushing towards achieving peace. I am Najma Minhas with GBS Deep Dive. Thanks for joining me today. Have a great day.
She did a pretty good job, I would say. Pretty good job. But there are elements of this that she didn't connect to the rest of the. She just dealt with the effects on the Middle East, and her focus was very narrow. You, my audience, have to look at this with your eyes on where you are, who you are, and Africa. The Middle East is on fire today. Africa has always been on fire. But the fire is about to get hotter. See, before the Europeans were there to pee on the situation. They didn't have water hoses. They just peed on it, and the Africans was there just eating it up, you know. They were glad to be cooled by pee. Now the Europeans can't pee on the Africans anymore. They don't have any. I hope you understand, you comprehend what I'm saying. And as I always say, prepare for this. Prepare. Whether you're in the US or in Africa, it's coming. Peace.